Hope everybody's doing well. We'll bring Lou on in a couple of minutes. And yeah, normally I would, if I was doing like a live ask me anything, I would take questions. But my questions I have written for Lou, some of them are kind of involved, so I kind of got to focus. And I probably will not get to all my questions. I pulled some questions from Twitter, but hopefully I'll get to some of those too. I have too many questions. Too many questions and too many details. Here we go. The comments are making me, the insults are making me relax, so I appreciate that. But that's fine. All right, I'm going to bring Lou in 2 minutes. Like I said, I'll try to glance at the chat, but I am pretty good at multitasking. But today I'll probably just focus on questions. And I've been listening to as many Lou interviews as I can, as I've been able to in the past couple of days, which is a lot because he's constantly doing this, which is amazing for us. We don't have anybody in this community except maybe Brandon Fugel, who is this open and generous with their time. And I have a lot of Eric Davis related questions, of course, because I speak to Eric, communicate with Eric. He writes like you would not believe, although he's been busy for the past couple of months. But I write, he shares so much information with me. If I have a question about history of ufology, he's the one. He's the one I go to. Big echo. There's a big echo. Everybody else, anybody else have the echo? Let me know. In the chat, just let me know if there's an echo. Okay, it's you, David. All right, I'm going to bring Lou in. It is almost 11 o'clock Mountain Time. Yeah, David, nobody else has an echo, so it may be something on your end. Check to see if you have two windows open, although that shouldn't cause an echo usually. All right. There he is, Mr. Lou Elizondo. It's been a long time coming, Lou. Thank you so much for doing this.
Sir, my honor and privilege. And by the way, I've been following a lot of your work. Thank you for what you're doing and your tireless efforts. It's really making a difference. We're kind of all a coalition here, right? And we're all kind of trying to do our part. And I just want to say thank you for the outstanding work.
You're welcome. And I know I do get a little out of control on Twitter when I defend you and I defend others, but there are people that say such ridiculous things that I just can't, with my Sicilian background, I can't shut up. So sometimes I go overboard, and I apologize for that, but that's just in my nature, and I try to get it under control, but it's tough.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. It's funny that look, I don't mind someone who doesn't like me. I'm cool with that. You don't have to like me, but when people make things up, that's a different story, right? And then when you challenge them on it, either they'll I got a buddy of mine who was blocked by somebody who has been fairly critical lately. By the way, unsubstantiated too. And of course, a lot of these people are willing to dish it out, but the moment someone comes in with a counter argument, they block you. I don't want to hear it. And so it is frustrating. Every day it's like I get some new accusation where I can't tell how many times that people say, well, when are you going to do a real interview and do it with somebody who doesn't necessarily like you, and you only do interviews that people that like you? I said, well, that's not true. I mean, if you look at the long list of individuals who've written hit pieces on me, whether it's Clore or Scholes, or even folks that don't really particularly like Green Street or even Greenwald or Jimmy Church or Mick West, I've spoken to all of them, and they're not. I mean, in some cases, these people aren't necessarily bad people. They just disagreed with my position, but I've given them time and I've given them interviews and multiple interviews, and I'm not asking people to agree with me or disagree. What I'm simply asking people to do is think for themselves. And I just, Twitter is one of the things where anybody can say anything. and even if it's unqualified. And that to me is it's a bit concerning, because I'm not sure everybody on social media realizes on social media that, really anybody can say anything. And a lot of things that people say aren't qualified. They just haven't done their research. They're not based in fact. They're based on emotion. Maybe I don't like Lou's hair or Lou's goatee or Lou's beard for the day, right? And so I'm just going to throw something out there, and then when they're challenged on it, they don't retract it. They just kind of disappear into the darkness. And I think part of that is the psychology of social media. But a lot of these things people would never be willing to say to your face, Joe. And yet, behind this magical screen of protection where I can hide in anonymity, for some reason, it's almost this mob mentality where people feel that they can throw tomatoes and then hide their hand behind their back and no one will know. I think it's disingenuous. A lot of these people that will tell me, "Hey, Lou, why don't you just come out and say everything you know and go to jail and go, provide secrets that you shouldn't be saying and violate your NDA." These are the same people that don't even put their real name on their Twitter handle, right? They hide behind a fake name and a screen name. So I think a lot of people are probably becoming more wise to this. I was shocked to see the level of this. And then when you have people like you that are just trying to have an honest conversation and ask honest questions, that hatred extends to you. And to me, that's the most egregious. If you want to attack me, fine. Don't attack my family. Don't attack people that want to have an engagement on this topic just because they disagree with your opinion. When you get to the point where you have threatening language, which, by the way, I don't advise anybody ever do, because that's serious. When you do that, you're going to elicit certain responses, and not all of them are necessarily going to be very good. I don't think there's a need for it. I think we need to all kind of sit back, relax, and tone down the rhetoric. There's a big concern right now that I have that's distracting a little bit from this topic, which is a current issue in Ukraine. I mean, there are innocent people dying right now, and in terrible ways, and children and women and civilians. I just think we should be a little bit more civil towards each other. I just think we need to take a breath, step back. Let's have a conversation. I'm not the kind of guy that takes threats very well, because of my past. It's pretty clear. If anybody who knows me knows the organizations I was associated with. We can have civil conversations without having to resort to those low level, tactics, because they're not effective. What it does, it brings the whole conversation down in this discussion of UAPs or UFO, where you want to call it UFO Twitter or anything like that. I think anybody from the outside that comes in and looks at that realizes that there's some dysfunction, and what we're trying to do is bring everybody up, not push people down. So that's just my 2 cents, or maybe 3 cents.
Yeah, and I need to do a better job of it myself. I fall into that trap sometimes, but it's tough. But my first question is, would you violate your security oath if it meant pineapple on pizza would be banned from the face of the earth?
Boy, that's a hard one. Maybe. No.
No, you don't have to answer that. I'm just
Yeah.
I
No.
know, yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I say a lot of things in jest sometimes. I don't really have an issue with pineapple on pizza. I don't prefer it, but
I do.
it's sometimes it's just light humor to get people talking and realize that I'm human too, right? I have a sense of humor. I've got a life beyond UFOs. Not much of one, but I do have a little bit of one. And I'm human too, and so I try to humanize the conversation the best I can, because ultimately this is a conversation that all of us should be engaged in, and it's happening. And by the way, let me just tell you before we get into some questions here. 2 days ago was a historic day, and Joe, you're the first person that's going to know this publicly. It's happening right now in your podcast. I am very pleased to announce that there was a significant, and I can't overstate significant, milestone achieved about a day and a half ago. Without going into a lot of detail, it may come out public, it may not. But I think the NIM Aviation, the National Intelligence Manager for Aviation under the Director of National Intelligence, a 2-star general, needs to be significantly applauded. There was some significant effort that I think is certainly in the interest of the United States and the American people, that just occurred. And so I want to do a real quick shout out and a huge sincere thank you to the wonderful folks at the DNI and the NIM Aviation, the general, for outstanding work. Thank you for doing what you did and keeping the American people, the focus of your job. This Never in the history of the topic of UAPs have we got to this milestone, and that was just achieved. And by the way, I think it's a step in the right direction for transparency. I think the result of what just happened will result in a trickling down of information to the public where it belongs. So when people say, "Oh, I want to see another video," or "I want to see," a significant step was taken a couple of days ago towards that direction. So I, again, just want to say congratulations to the folks, men and women at the DNI and everybody else who's been working so hard and tirelessly on this and has been taking this topic seriously. And a big congratulations to our NIM Aviation, the general. So thank you very much for doing what you did.
That's great. I mean, it's been an amazing 4 years. I know a lot of people they think that we're not moving, but it's like I've been at this since '96, and it's like the last 4 years have been amazing. The last couple of
Yeah.
weeks, there are times when I can't even keep up. So thank you for doing what you're doing. I know, and what Christopher Mellon and Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff and Eric and Kit Green and Hal and Gary Nolan. I don't want to forget anybody, but
Yeah, they're great human beings. You're right. I feel, I always tell people I'm literally standing on the shoulders of giants. And you're right. There's others. I think Chris Mellon is right there at the top, and Gary Nolan and Hal Puthoff, Kit Green. These individuals have done so much for their country. A lot of it behind the scenes that maybe most average Americans will never find out. But I can tell you that I was there and I've seen it. Eric Davis, the same thing. Truly, just incredibly competent human beings, and their patriotism is unwavering. And there's a bunch of others. My hope is very soon here to bring out some individuals that maybe you're not aware of, or maybe you've heard whispers about. My hope is I'm working very hard to bring them out of the shadows in a very meaningful way. And so we can expand this conversation, open up the aperture, and you guys can ask some more questions to some of these folks that had very key roles and responsibilities in this topic for the U.S. government.
And I know you've spoken about Eric before. I think you've pretty much said this, but there's emails out there. There are emails out there. And Christopher Mellon was on CNN saying he was with Eric Davis on Capitol Hill when he gave briefings. Can you just confirm Eric did give briefings on this subject?
Oh, yeah. You're damn right he did.
Your intelligence committee?
I'm going to be very careful to say who, because
Okay.
I want to give them the opportunity to answer for themselves. But that was indeed true. Chris and I are on the Hill a lot, and we bring people up there. That's part of the engagement strategy. At some point we decided to be open kimono about our strategy, and legislative engagement is right there. Because these people make the laws. Look at the Gillibrand Amendment that now became law, right? This historic moment in U.S. history where we're actually taking this topic seriously. That only happened because you had really good people working behind the scenes, engaging good lawmakers and their staff. And Eric is no exception. And there's others that maybe haven't come out public yet that have been up there. But on the other side of the coin, we also have to congratulate the staff of these members of Congress, whether it's on the House or the Senate side, because they are, people think that a congressperson is, the end all be all. But it's not. It's kind of like a president. You have a whole staff underneath that's supporting that individual to help make informed decisions. And the same is true with members of Congress. They have chiefs of staff, and they have national security advisors and whatnot that are all there to help advise them when creating or voting on laws. And these people have done a tremendous job. They have done a tremendous amount of work. I mean, it's not like Senator Gillibrand sits there and writes every single word to the law. She has people helping draft the language and make sure it's legal, right? That she doesn't, cross any wires between executive branch and legislative branch and whatnot. So it's been a tremendous effort. And Eric has certainly been a critical piece to that. I am not going to provide any details what he has said for the record, because that's for him to tell you if he wants to. But I will tell you it was significant, and it helped move the ball forward in this topic for sure. There is no question about it.
Here's a question I get about Eric all the time, because he has been pretty open when he was doing interviews. He's like, there is a crash retrieval program. And he talks, that's as far as he'll go. He says the world's superpowers have had their own share of crashes. And then Hal Puthoff has said reluctantly, he's like, yeah, there have been crashes, and then you're more careful. So people are like, why can Eric talk about that and Lou cannot? And I don't have an answer for that. Maybe you can
Yeah.
explain.
Well, I can't. I'm not going to speak for Eric, as I've said before. I'm just not, or Hal, or anybody else. I can only tell you what I've been told. Um, for me, I let me make this as clear as I possibly can. I am not at liberty to discuss any details involving the topic you just mentioned. I have said for the record, I've gone up to the line of what I could say, and I at this time I am not at liberty to provide any more details on it. Not that I don't want to, I cannot. Hopefully that will change over time, but that decision is not up to me right now.
I want to go back to the last episode of Unidentified, because I have been accused of being a Lou Elizondo apologist, a TTSA fanboy, and that's not true. I've disagreed with you along the way. I mean, overall, I love
Sure.
what you guys are doing,
No,
but along the way, we've
I've seen it.
disagreed. Yeah,
No, and you've asked good questions, and you've challenged the system. I'm absolutely. I mean, I can attest to that. I've seen things where you're in my position may not necessarily be congruent. We may not
right.
necessarily agree, but I think your approach is right on the money. I really respect your approach.
So thank you. The one thing I disagreed with was the last episode of Unidentified. You said you had personal friends who had abduction. Well, you said amazing stories to tell, but it was about abductions, encounters with non-human beings, and you said, I believe they believe what they're telling me, but you could be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. And that particular episode, they had, I forget her name, Susan. She was she had written a book about abductions where it was
Sure.
basically she said it was sleep paralysis and it was
Right.
hypnosis. They were leading the witnesses, and Robert Hastings, who you interviewed, he was not happy with that episode. I mean, he
I
said
understand.
there was evidence that was left out. There were other witnesses that
Yeah.
were corroborating some information. He's like, I don't know
Yeah.
why they left it out. Were you disappointed with that?
I you know, I don't have, I didn't have I didn't have creative authority
Right.
on the show. Again, I'm not a executive producer. I'm
And
not
he
even
did
a,
say that. He said, I know Lou, this is producers. This is not Lou.
yeah, no. Look, but you do have to provide a counter argument in order to provide that. One of the things, the agreements that we had, Chris and I, when we decided to get into the show, was very simple. First of all, it's going to be short term. We're not looking at just creating material for the sake of having a show that lasts forever. That's not what this is about. Get it done. Part of our public engagement piece. And secondly, that we were always going to provide counter arguments so the audience can make up their own decision. This wasn't, hey, what does Lou and Chris think? This wasn't about that. This journey on Unidentified was, hey, let's go out and find from the people what their experiences are, and then provide both the arguments for and the arguments against. And unfortunately, because you are compressed to, I think it's either 43 minutes per episode, with commercials and whatnot, or 48 minutes, a lot of the stuff gets cut and stays on the floor, the editing floor, and it's a shame because there's I'll tell you, there's so much information that never made it into the series that is so compelling. I mean, it is, and this is honestly one of the reasons why I'm engaged now and looking at very seriously doing a perhaps the definitive documentary on this topic, because in this particular case, I will have the ability to ask questions that I couldn't before. And I'm not going to be subject to a 43 or 48-minute time limit. Look, History Channel did really good for the first time introducing this topic in a way that wasn't, woo-woo, right? And not that there's anything wrong with that, but really this was a little bit different than most UFO shows. And it succeeded. I think for what we were trying to achieve, it was certainly mission success. But is there a lot more that can now be discussed? I mean, well, a lot's happened since the last season, right? So we have a law that came out. We have a 180-day report. We now have annual reports coming out. We have more and more people coming out, from directors of CIA, directors of national intelligence, right? Former presidents. We didn't have that when we were doing the show. That's all out now, and there are a lot of people coming out of the woodwork now, sharing information. So this is one of the reasons why I think the public engagement is so important. Let's have that conversation with the American people, and maybe the time is right to continue that part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's for me, it's just an amazing time. And
By the way, for the record, I didn't agree with necessarily with her assessment. I'm not sure I agree with the whole sleep paralysis thing,
right,
but you have to provide a counter argument, because you don't want to lead the witness. You want to, you want to allow everybody to have a voice. But for the record, I'm not a big subscriber to the whole sleep paralysis thing. I'm just not.
right. I well, and I work in television, and the show was very well done. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. The other day, this caused a
Thank you.
lot of. It hasn't really. I don't know if people have heard this yet, and it's going to take me a little while to read it. But Jacques Vallée had given a lecture at the Archives of the Unknown at Rice University, and he said, he goes, and I know you and Jim Semivan have said we don't do testing on our own people anymore. We have Tuskegee in our history and MK Ultra. We don't do that anymore. Vallée said, and I'm going to quote Vallée, it's a little bit long. He goes, anyone going through the Rice archives in search of info about UFOs should, in my estimation, keep in mind that any cases dated after 75 and certainly after 1985 must first be analyzed as potential fakes, not necessarily hoaxes, mind you, but products of classified projects, of which there were hundreds. They play on human expectations of things in the sky in order to hide or simply disguise new experiments with secret platforms. This is true for aircraft, for the types whose capabilities, shapes, and material composition must legitimately remain secret, but it also applies to biological experiments, tests of remote paralysis, special drugs, and psychic manipulation in projects reminiscent of the old MK Ultra. In such an environment, some canceled projects never really die. This is obviously a challenge to researchers like me, like us, and to any ufologist. It is even more a challenge to researchers from the military and the intelligence community because, in spite of their special status, even they might not have the right clearances or access to the right data set in the programs, which acronyms they don't even know. Once a project goes dark, duplication runs rampant, and oversight becomes tangled up as a game of Scrabble. So, what do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? Let me give you a real life anecdote. There was once an organization called CIFO, the Counterintelligence Field Activity. Um, it wound up being disestablished. This was a huge organization, many millions of dollars that were allocated to this organization, and its mission was good. The problem is that during the course of its operation, it had one report of a U.S. person's information in there, in a database, an intelligence database that didn't belong. And there is something called DoD Directive 5240, where you have to be very cognizant of the collection, retention, analysis, and dissemination of U.S. persons' information. In essence, U.S. citizens' information. It created a situation where they had to disestablish the entire agency because of that. So if there are people running rogue operations, then or what we would consider extra constitutional activities, that's a problem. I will be the first one to, if I were to ever find that out, call them out on it, and hold them accountable. We just simply don't do that, and we shouldn't do it. We have in the past. Hopefully, we've paid for those sins and have learned our lessons. I can tell you personally, I've never been privy to anything like that. Now, that's U.S. persons, right? I'm not going to say that there hasn't been experiment on non-lethal technology that has been used and looked at by the intelligence community, Department of Defense, DARPA. There's technologies all the time. We know that there's, for example, sonic technology that we can deploy in a civil situation to create confusion and to create some sort of disorientation amongst a crowd of people. It is a non-lethal means. In fact, if you were to talk to Colonel John Alexander, he'll tell you there's a long history of that type of research being done, but you don't just sit there and deploy it on hapless civilians. There is a process, an approval process that occurs, and you use volunteers to do that. And so, again, I am not aware of any experimentation on human beings without their consent, U.S. persons and from U.S. citizens. And if I were to ever find that out, I'd be the first one to call it out. I think it's abhorrent, and I think it's against the very fabric of our nation and what we stand for as a people.
Okay, thanks for that, Lou. And when you were interviewed by Richard Dolan, you said that a close colleague of yours encountered a men in black like group where the UFO information and data was confiscated, and some intimidation took place, according to your colleague. And in Skinwalkers in the Pentagon, they talked about a Kentucky town where they had a sighting. The whole town saw it. They were told to shut up, and it seemed seemingly they were bribed by the whole town was given electricity later on. This was in the 90s. There's a case in Georgia in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon where a man was hit by a light from a triangle. Next day, he had low-flying helicopters visited by two men in black type guys who brandished guns. He felt intimidated, told him not to talk about it, and they traced the license plate back to DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Do you think all of that is from the same group that your colleague encountered? Some group that's operating in the black? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I operated in the black. I mean, what does that mean? I think a lot of people we tend to assume things, and are there a core group of people that are trying to keep this topic very close hold to themselves? I mean, that was probably the case. But are they going out and intimidating people? Well, I'll tell you what, they better be careful, because you try to intimidate the wrong person, and you're going to have a hell of a lot of problems. There's a lot of people out there right now that don't take intimidation lightly. At least people that I work with. That would be the last thing you'd want to do, is show up armed to someone's doorstep who's highly trained in counterterrorism operations and kinetic operations. I wouldn't advise that. And I don't care how black you might think you are. There's going to be someone out there that can outgun you and outshoot you, and will. So, I have not personally, now I have seen intimidation tactics, but done more like through what we call administrative terrorism, where they try to get you on a security violation. They try to take away your security clearance. They might make false accusations about your professional performance. I have a colleague of mine now who they try to go after pretty substantially. Unfortunately, we were able to thwart it off with a combination of legal assistance and some maneuvering and calling the right people to say, hey, what the hell are you doing?
UAP related or something else?
No, UAP related for sure. Yeah, UAP related. Yeah, and but it's in some cases to be expected that intimidation is a way to get people either to do something or not to do something. There's some people that you can intimidate, and then there's people that you definitely don't want to intimidate, because they will poke back. And a lot of my colleagues are those type of people. So I have not personally experienced anybody showing up to my door. I will tell you that if someone showed up to my door with a document saying, hey, Lou, we want you to back off because you were stepping on national security toes. I'm a patriot. I would do it. No one's ever done that. You show up to my door with a gun, then I hope you have life insurance policy, because it probably won't end well.
Speaking of being in the black, any opinions about military abductions? Because there are people I know who I like who claim to have my labs. Any information, any opinion on that?
On the
Military,
my
where they
labs.
have my labs, where they have an abduction where it's military and non-humans are involved a lot. Allegedly.
I could see something like that happening maybe, in the 60s, or possibly, 50s, 60s, and 70s, or in the height of the Cold War. I can't imagine that being the case now. It's easy to throw on a uniform, I guess, and pretend that you're somebody that you're not. I don't know of any rational military officer or enlisted member who would willingly kidnap an American citizen and then assault them, right? Because if I touch you, if I take you away against your free will, that's a felony. That's called kidnapping. And then if I touch you without your consent, well, that's called assault, right? And depending on how much I touch you, it could escalate from there. I'm not aware of any government officials that would willfully do that on American citizens. And if that has occurred, then there's a problem there. I'm not sure there's enough information to substantiate the whole notion of mill labs. I think we're just now coming to the terms of the reality of UAP, right? We just now got to the point as a country where we know that they're real. All this other stuff is, we've got a lot more homework to do, I think, before we can go down that road.
Okay. One question, I know you've answered this, but I didn't like your answer. I want to know more. So when you're in AATIP or OSAP when you first got there, How did you react when you realized some of the craft you were seeing were probably not ours and probably maybe belonged to something anomalous? I mean, did you want to run home and tell your wife? It was like, you're not going to believe what I just saw. Oh my God. I mean, because you said you never really looked into UFOs before.
No, I mean my wife and I have we've been married, like I said, we've been together damn near 30 years. I've actually been with my wife longer than I've been alone. And so we have a very, very close, very special relationship. If anybody wants to know for the record who doesn't think I'm married, I was married in Arapahoe County. So you can dig files there. I was not married in Florida, so you're probably wasting your time trying to dig up that information. Um, so check Arapahoe County and you'll find it. So we have a very special relationship. She also knows there's things that I can't talk about, and I won't. I won't violate my non-disclosure agreement with the American people, and I won't do it with my wife. Not that I don't trust her. I trust her with every ounce of fabric of my existence. But again, I took an oath, right? And she doesn't ask me, and I don't tell her. Once I got out of the U.S. government, then I was able to be a little bit more forthcoming, and she knew what I was dealing with. She also realized I was dealing with things, interestingly enough, early on, because we had some very strange occurrences, and so I don't want to go into that too much, but it's not uncommon if you find somebody who was ever part of the OSAP or even AATIP program that things can get a little strange sometimes. I guess, to answer your question bluntly, have I ever told my wife something that I shouldn't? No. But have I been as forthcoming as I possibly can? Yes. My wife knows everything, and the general public.
It's
Because she
more about
lived
how
through.
you reacted, though. How did you react when you finally realized you're seeing videos?
Oh, I
Like,
see what you're saying. Yeah, I
yeah,
guess I was focusing on, did you go home and tell your
scratch
wife and
light
say,
bulbs.
hey, guess what? Yeah. It's a profound moment. I wasn't particularly surprised simply because of my scientific background. I always recognize that life is abundant just on this planet alone. So who's to say it's not in the universe, right? In fact, statistically, there's a more likely chance that it is pervasive in the universe than it is not. Um, and with my background, most of my background was focused on counterterrorism, counterespionage, counterinsurgency. So I was always used to dealing with surprises and intelligence. What I guess the interesting thing about his intelligence is you're not really ever truly surprised. That is the job of intelligence, is to peel away the obvious and then look at what's real. And so I've had that occur in my life so many times that it was just kind of a wow, okay. Here we have the confirmation that we're looking for. That is, it is real. Again, now of course the hard part comes in. Well, what is it? What is it? Where is it from? How does it work? Who's behind the wheel? What are the intentions? Right? What are the capabilities? So rather than focusing on the aha moment, whoa, here we are, it's real. It's now comes the hard part. Okay, now let's focus on the other interrogatives that are hopefully going to be even more important to us than just the acknowledgement that it's real.
And I think you may have just touched on it, so I'm going to ask. You've been around the subject a lot. Have you had any hitchhiker-like experiences, taking stuff home with you, poltergeist-like activity, anything like that?
So I'm in the process of writing a very comprehensive book, and I'm hoping to address a lot of things, for the record, once and finally. Um, I'd rather not get into that conversation right now. There is some subjectivity, obviously, whenever people talk about that. That is a part of the OSAP portfolio that a lot of people, a vast majority of people, had experienced what you refer to as a hitchhiker event, but it's very subjective. And it seems to be, in some cases, there seems to be some commonality with some of the participants to OSAP, and then in some cases, it's very, very unique. It's based upon the individual, and they'll have an experience that's nobody else has had. So it's a mystery, and it's a great question, but one that I think there's other individuals I can probably talk to you about that aspect of the portfolio maybe a little better than I can.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question that you were asked in October of 2020. A friend of mine, Aida, she said, "Are we witnessing different facets of one intelligence? And you responded, you said, there's compelling data to suggest both, as crazy as it seems, but we need an entire podcast to talk about it. So can you expand on that, your opinions on whether it's one, because I go back and forth. Is it one intelligence that's mimicking and pretending to be all these different things, or is it multiple intelligences that, we're dealing with?
Well, do you want to spend the rest of the podcast talking about it? We can. It's and I've said this before, and I really think this is important. If you want to you really want to drill down and try to figure out something that is potentially non-human, you probably have to think in non-human terms, and that is really hard to do. We are biological creatures that through evolution think a certain way. In fact, we even go to the point of attributing other life forms on this planet to a point where we give them human characteristics, anthropomorphism, right? Where we connect with other species, let's say a dog, right? And I've got 4 of them. I love my dogs, and yes, I treat them like human beings. Are they human? Well, no, but I treat them as human because I consider them having some of the same human attributes that I have and that you have and everybody else has. And that's normal. In fact, you can even see we do it with automobiles. How many people have a car out there, let's say a Volkswagen or something, where they put little cute eyes on it, or maybe a little, ears or tail. During Christmas time, you'll see people put a little red nose for like Rudolph. That is the anthropomorphic nature of our species, and we do it subconsciously. We do it in virtually every aspect of our interaction with other life forms. Yet, when you're talking about something that may not necessarily be from here, may think completely different, how it thinks and the way it interacts with others like it, that's a challenge. That's a challenge because we're now seeing that we're at a point where, let's talk about, for example, artificial intelligence. We are getting very close to the point where a silicone-based computer may eventually reach some sort of self-awareness, and now by definition is that a life form, right? Something that operates instead of a 4-digit genetic sequence, AGCT, maybe work off of 2 digits, right? Ones and zeros, binary, and yet it can think and perhaps be conscious. Look, there was an experiment not too long ago, and I think it was with the Department of Navy at a university, where they took 2 computers that had never been that had artificial intelligence, both of them separate, and they connected them for the very first time. And within about 30 minutes, they wound up having to unplug both computers. And why is that? Well, that's because both computers started to talk to each other in a language that we couldn't understand.
Hmm.
So, how do we deal with that? Well, we created artificial intelligence and we still don't understand it, let alone something that perhaps may not be from here, maybe truly existential. How do you interact with something like that? Are we even asking the right questions, right? We say, for example, where are they from? Well, it may not be where, maybe it's a when, right? Again, I don't know. Don't read too much into that, because people are going to say, well, Lou says time travel. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply using it as an example. We may not even be asking the right questions, because from our paradigm, those are valid questions. But for something else that's super, super sophisticated, maybe it's not. And therein lies the challenge. And when you're asking about multiple species or a single species, well, again, that's human terms, right? Multiple cultures or multiple races or a single race. That might not even be valid. Maybe these
Right.
things are living in a paradigm that is so foreign to us, or dare I say the word alien to us, that we don't even realize we're asking the wrong questions. But maybe we are. Maybe they're from here. Maybe they're just as natural to the human world as we are, but they experience life and reality a little bit differently, where time itself is a 3-dimensional space, perhaps, or that there are multiple realities going on at any given time. There are some theories scientifically that have postulated that as well. And again, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole from a physics perspective and science perspective, because I know probably you've got a lot of questions. But I guess my point being, when Ida asked me that question, is that there's All are possible, and yet there may also be some options we haven't even yet considered. So is it one species? Yeah. Could it be multiple species? Yeah. Could it be one species with several subspecies underneath? Yes. Could it be that we're talking about an artificial intelligence? Yes. Is it something that where you could have a species at this level, and then you have these worker species below? Yes. Is it? I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Is it us? You know, possibly from some other place or time. There's a lot of what ifs, and we have very little detail right now to go on to give us anything. So really, all, as I said before, all options have to be on the table until they're not.
And it seems to me, just looking at people, and this may just be one aspect of it. And you've touched on this before. People are getting injured. It may not be intentional. It may just be whatever this
Right.
is doing whatever it's doing, and it really doesn't really care about us that much. They're above us on the food chain. Just like when we're driving out and we kill a deer on the road, we feel
Right.
bad, but we get on with the rest of our day. No big deal.
Right. I mean, look, I'll give you a perfect case in point. I was mowing the lawn during the summer here when I did have 3 feet of snow on the lawn, and I kicked up a rock, and that rock came out and wound up ricocheting inside and wind up hitting my cheek and had little blood here and bruised for a little while. Was it intentional that the lawnmower kicked up a rock and injured me? No, it's just a result of the technology. It just happens that I didn't wear the right protection, and I'm dealing with a technology, in this case, a spinning a blade spinning at high revolutions that have a steel blade that kicked up a rock and threw it at me. Random that it just happened to bounce in the right way and hit me in the face. So I think we need to be careful. There's a difference between threat, a biological threat, and hostile intent. And we have to separate the two, because hostile intent isn't necessarily the same as a threat. As I've said before, I have to fly to California, for example, tomorrow. And when I go to the airport and I sit there and have a cocktail or something, or get on the plane, there's no real threat by that 737. But yet, if I go outside and I run on the tarmac and I put my head behind the jet engine while it's taxiing, well, now it's a threat. I'm going to get burned. I'm probably going to lose my hearing. Is it the jet's fault? No. It's just that I happen to be, at the wrong place at the wrong time when certain technology is being applied in a certain way. Is that what we're dealing with here? Well, there seems to be enough anecdotal information to suggest, yes, that there is a threat. Whether there's hostile intent yet remains to be seen. And I think we have to, pay attention. Now, if we can substantiate that people are actually being taken away from their own free will, then I'd say, yeah, then this is a different conversation. Then we've got to really have that conversation in earnest. So yeah, there you have it.
What about any evidence or anecdotes about that you're aware of where the intelligence, whatever is here, can influence human behavior? Anything about that? Because the infamous slide 9 kind of goes in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Russians and the U.S. in the '60s were really, really looking at non-kinetic ways to affect human behavior. We have, in fact, psychological operations and something called IO, information operations, where we are trying to create an outcome through influence. Now, there's many ways to influence human beings. You can do it verbally. You can do it emotionally. You can do it physically. I mean, there's all sorts of ways. I think it's certainly possible. Let's take a real case scenario. We have nuclear capabilities, right? We've got weapons and propulsion, and we have military technology. When you fly a UAP over controlled U.S. airspace, and despite throwing the very best at it that we got, we still can't keep up with it. We can't engage it, and it just pops out of existence, or appears to, anyways. That is communicating potentially an intent that, look, there is this technology out there that far exceeds yours, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. We do it all the time when the Russians send a reconnaissance aircraft too close to the United States. What do? We scramble a couple F-16s or F-22s, and it's on the front page of CNN and Fox News, right? And we're not talking to them, but we're communicating an intent. Look, you come much further, we will shoot you down, and vice versa. They do it to us. So there's lots of ways to communicate intent and capabilities, and that's what we're trying to figure out. We're having a conversation right now, but if I go like this to you, I'm still communicating something to you. I'm communicating hello, right? If I there's lots of ways to communicate. It doesn't have to be verbal. We always think that we'll sit down at a table and we're going to negotiate. Well, yeah, that's human terms. But I communicate with my dog all the time. My dogs communicate with me when they're hungry. They're not sitting down and saying, "Hey, Pops, I'm hungry. Fill up the bowl with food." What they do is they whine, they pace, they'll kind of look at the ball. Maybe they'll kick it around with their foot. Make no mistake, they're communicating loud and clear their intent. They want to eat, and so and I understand very clearly what they're trying to communicate. So we need to think in terms of that as well. What is communication? Is light a form of communication? Well, we do it with fiber optic all the time. Is presence a communication? Yeah, sure. Again, we do it all the time. You can see it on the front page of the news just about every week or so. So that would be my response.
Speaking, you mentioned nuclear, and I know you've talked about it, and I don't know if you can go any further about baiting and luring UFOs. You mentioned it on Christina Gomez's show the other day, how you successfully did that in AATIP, and someone online mentioned it was related to neutrinos. And somebody I know, a source, said, no, it's not neutrinos. The way we attract and coax UAP has to do with nuclear power, nuclear weapon sites, deployed weapons, or nuclear fuel being moved around, weapons being manufactured, nuclear fuel being manufactured and manufacturing sites, and that attracts them. So what else? I don't know what else you can add, but to me, that sounds like AI. It seems like it's reacting to something automatically.
Your friend seems to be pretty well informed. I'm not going to expound on too much on that. But yeah, there seems to be a definitive interest in our nuclear technologies. There's probably a really good reason for it. That was explored to some degree in AATIP. And I'm hoping to provide more fidelity in the book that I write on some of the theories and mathematics involved in that.
You know what's really interesting? I said it kind of hints at AI maybe reacting to that, but in the remote viewing program, there were remote viewers who were really good at detecting nuclear targets. It would like glow when they would do their remote viewing sessions. It would glow, and they would say, "All right, we have a nuclear target. Let's put so and so on that target." So maybe whatever we're dealing with is so far advanced on the PSI level psychically, it just pops up for them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and there's other interesting theories in physics too. That's certainly one potential case. There's probably about 8 or 9 different alternatives theories that we're looking at potentially to explain that. There's a couple that are very compelling. There's enough information to substantiate more than just an idea, but more of a real informed hypothesis. AI is something we created, and we have to be careful when we attribute something else outside potentially existential with AI, because again, that's a manifestation of mankind. We built it, so we understand it. We may be dealing with something that is different than AI. Maybe it is like AI. Maybe it is not like AI. Maybe it is something fundamentally different. And again, this is a problem that we have. This is why I think creating an academic advisory board, which I'm very much involved with right now, is going to be very important, because ultimately, to solve a non-human issue, you must first solve the human issue. You must first understand how we think before you can possibly start trying to figure out how something else thinks. And we don't even know how we think. We have entire professional careers dedicated, whether you're a psychologist or psychiatrist or a sociologist or philosopher, theologian, to try to figure out how we think, and we still don't know how we think. So therein lies the conundrum. How do we begin to figure out how something else thinks and their intent if we haven't yet even figured ourselves out? And so therein lies the humanistic issue. So one of the things we've done is bringing on board a human anthropologist, a PhD, who has looked over a long history of our species and kind of studied on why we did what we did when we did it, and how we did it as a species, and what were the influences, external influences that brought us to make those decisions. Was it purely environmental, or was there something else to it? And so these are all the things that have to be explored. And ultimately, like I said before, why is this important? Well, it's not just purely academic. At the end of the day, if something lands on the White House lawn tomorrow, the general is going to have to make a decision. Do I shoot it, or do I extend my hand out in friendship? And in reality, neither one may be the right choice. We think in terms of that. So to a general, maybe that's a right question, but maybe it's not. And so we have to figure out ourselves first how we think, and then maybe we can find somewhere there's some other solutions or alternatives.
You have a do you have a degree in parasitology, or is that just a
Yeah, so my degrees are microbiology, immunology, and the program I was in was parasitology. So my research was in malaria, vivax and ovulae, and malariae, and with some experience in leishmaniasis, both cutaneous and visceral, and also trypanosomiasis. So, which is again parasites, right? So looking how microorganisms get into the body, how they can evade the natural immune system and cause damage, and then what can the human system do to fight against some of those? A lot of this is like warfare, really. It's really no different than the way we work as human beings at the macro level. A lot of these microorganisms basically do the same things we do. Cancer to some degree behaves a lot like human beings.
so my question was going to be, is there any aspect of the phenomenon with your history in parasitology that behaves like a parasite? There are cases with poltergeist cases where they act. It seems parasitical in nature. I don't know if you've come across any of that. Maybe that was more of an OSAP thing.
Well, I mean, let's look. What is a parasite? A parasite is an organism that takes more than it gives, right? It's a non-symbiotic relationship. And one could argue that we are parasites ourselves. So a parasite on a parasite, is that really a parasite? Well, I don't know. We definitely take more from the environment and take more from each other than we give. That seems to be in our nature, and we replicate and replicate and replicate. What makes cancer so dangerous is that cancer is a rogue cell, that its genetic sequence is changed. There's a mutation that occurs, and it causes a replication of that cell, and it continues to replicate and make copies of itself to the point where it begins to disrupt the vital functions of the bigger organism. And the cancer isn't very smart. See, the cancer just knows that it wants to grow and grow and grow and take over. It doesn't realize that by doing so, it kills the very host, and then the cancer goes away. The cancer dies as well. But if you look at the way human beings work, there's a lot of similarity there, right? We continue to replicate and replicate and replicate. We take resources, until eventually there's no resources left, and we, in essence, kill the host. Whether or not this relationship involving, if you will, this UAPs is a parasitic relationship, or it's a symbiotic relationship, or it's neither of those, I think it's too early to tell. I don't know. Looking at it from a biological perspective, to make any type of assessment right now that it's a parasitic relationship, we don't know. Great question, but I'm not sure we have enough yet to make that determination.
2019, Lou, can you clarify either evidence you're aware of your opinion? And I know there are limitations with drones, what you've described, but specifically July of 2019, where Jeremy Corbell released videos. People are saying, those are drones, and everything I've heard from sources are like, what
Guys,
those
honestly, Joe, it doesn't matter, because stuff is happening every week. I
right?
mean, that's so yesterday. I mean,
Okay,
we can spend time talking about it if you want,
no,
but
that's fine.
I'm telling you right now, there's information coming in almost on a daily basis from very sophisticated sensor systems, and it is very compelling. We're not talking about blips on a radar. We're not talking about fuzzy pictures. Clear, compelling photos. That comes in a lot. And again, the intelligence community is that flow of information. That spigot is finally flowing. The water coming out of that spigot is finally flowing to where it needs to go. we can dissect that incident just like we can dissect the Nimitz and the Roosevelt and the kid and the Omaha and the boxer and yada. It goes on and on and on and on and on. I think what's important that people really may not be aware of. People say, "Well, I want to see the video." Okay, well, we got it. We're working on it. That hopefully will happen. But what's more important than you seeing a video is the fact that the people who need to see those videos are now beginning to see those videos. And they're working their way up to some very senior people in our government, and even the lawmakers are being now made aware of it. So it's working. The construct that we spent the last 4 years trying to help create is finally coming to fruition. And by the way, I can't take credit for it because it's been a lot of people involved in this effort, but it is happening, and it's beginning to work very well. So if you want to talk certainly about that, we can talk about the drones. I have
No,
my opinions are strong on it.
we're
Drones
good.
can only do certain things. We have
Right.
only certain capabilities, right? A lithium ion battery of X weight
Yeah.
can only provide so much charge, period. That's physics. So if you see it doing something else, then there's something else going on. Now, there is technology in directed energy, right? Eric will tell you this. You can actually, I can remotely step back and I can shoot a directed energy at something. Look, your phone, right? You can put on a charger without even plugging it in, and it'll charge the battery. So there are ways to transmit energy over distance. Back to your original question, you were asking me probably about 30 minutes ago about Russia, U.S., and doing experiments on people and psychic and remote viewing. There was a very robust effort by the Russians called psychotronic weaponry. Psychotronic weaponry was the integration of human cognition and human brain function, consciousness, and the ability to manipulate matter through a technical device. That actually was a very real program that Russia spent a lot of time and money on, and suspect they probably still are. To try to influence and affect decision making, but in their favor with other world leaders. It's not surprising. You have this thing called Havana syndrome, right? Where people are getting very sick. We still don't know why. Um, if you know how energy works and you can direct that energy, then you can affect the environment in specific ways.
On that same angle, I had somebody tell me, somebody who I trust, that they have sources who are telling them that Putin has developed a directed energy weapon based on UAP technology. Any
Um,
information on that?
well, I want to be really careful. Let me give you a very real case in point that you don't hear much about anymore. There was actually a terrorist here in our country a while ago that was building a van to put a directed energy weapon inside of a van, a cargo van, and zap people, literally cook them from the inside out. And that terrorist was arrested for trying to do that. So that technology exists. Now, you don't need to exploit a UAP or a UFO to do that. You don't. We've had that technology for a long time, and now with the right understanding and the right equipment, you could probably build one in your basement. It's scary, very scary. Um, you know, so that's a real case in point of what directed energy can do. You don't need UFOs to build something like that.
I think it was 2 years ago. You wrote the article on Medium about your predecessor, who at the time you couldn't name. It was James Lukatsky, and how his career was ruined by certain people who had an ideology and
Yeah.
people who think this is demonic. Now, somebody told me recently, they said those same folks are higher up in the Air Force. It's not mentioned you guys don't mention it all, but are those folks really the ones who are holding this back? Are they? And I know it's not the whole Air Force, but there's certain people
Yeah,
high
and
up.
it's not just the Air Force. Look, Jim Lukatsky asked me to make him a promise early on, and that when I came out, I would protect him, and I did, and that's why early on, I never mentioned his name until he came out and mentioned his name. I respected that tremendously, and by the way, they were gunning for him. I mean, this is a guy they were really coming after, and so we really had to circle the wagons around him the best that we could.
Who's they though?
Um,
Who's coming after him?
I'm not going to share names right now. Those individuals are still part of the system. Some of them are out. I suspect they still have a lot of influence, very, very senior members of the U.S. government. Fortunately, we had some friends that we could call as well. and provide counterfire, I guess in lay terms. But yeah, they have they have.
Those are the folks who think this is demonic. Those folks.
Some of them did, yeah, and they had a lot of rank and a lot of influence, and they had been around the system for a very long time. One of them was actually a mentor of mine, and it was it was really really sad to see, because this person was normally an incredible intelligence officer. I mean, really did some great stuff for our country, but had this this thing about him where, if it had anything to do with that conflicted with the theological belief system, it was considered demonic. It was considered anti-Christian, and I disagree with that. I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, but I believe in a lot of the same things and principles that he believed in. But I also believe that knowledge and information is important to our species. Otherwise, we don't grow. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good or how bad the news is. We need to know what it is. And that's where I differed with some of these folks who were part of this little religious cabal that existed.
In your interview with David Marceau, you mentioned that certain members of Congress, and I don't think a lot of people know this. I didn't know it until I was just looking at the interview. They've shared some of their UAP experiences with you. I know you can't tell us who, but what kind of were they like really impressive, or just everyday UFO experiences, or any of them thinking about talking about it?
I love what you said. Everyday UFO experiences. That's how far. That's how far we've come in the conversation, right? Where now it's.
I'm so spoiled. It's ridiculous.
Well, I guess that's a good thing that we can talk about in those terms. Yeah. In some cases, some of them were your typical glowing light in the sky, moving erratically, moving very fast, changing directions 90 degrees. In other cases, far more compelling, much more up close and personal. In fact, in some cases, terrifying. As you said correctly, I'm not going to speak and reveal what they've shared with me. It was shared to me in confidence. And if anybody knows by now, I'm one of those guys that if I tell you something, I will deliver. Even at the cost of saving my own skin, I'm not that guy. And so this is another case, just like with Jim Lukatsky asking me not to reveal his identity. I'm not going to reveal the identity of these representatives, nor am I going to reveal their stories until they decide they want to do it. But yeah, they shared with me their experiences, and some were very, very compelling, and some were not surprising at all. Some of them, when they were explaining to me, I'm like, "Hey, that's interesting. That sounds like one of our cases right out of AATIP. maybe you were there." So yeah, there you have it.
Is there any way this is frustrating for me and other people, like somebody like Senator Heinrich will come out and he'll say, what we're seeing in there, I don't think that's ours. Is there any way for them to just tell us what they're seeing? Because it doesn't affect sources and methods. If they were to come out and say, I saw this object up close, silver disc, and it took off like a bat out of hell and made a 90-degree turn. Is there anything that we can do to actually get them so they're able to? I know it's.
I think they're getting there. I think they're getting there. There's been some products put out to the U.S. government, specific agencies and bureaus. I'm not going to go into detail what they've seen and what products have been put out, but they know. That's why they're taking it seriously. There's been video now shared and products briefings that are not what the general public has seen, and saying, hey, we got to get to the bottom of this. This is real. Here you go. You can see it for yourself. Unfortunately, it's classified. So a lot of these folks aren't going to say anything, and nor should they. They're doing the right thing by not saying anything. But ultimately, this is the intent of the Gillibrand Amendment, right? To provide an unclassified report. Why is that important? Because now, Joe, that scratch, that itch that's been bothering you for so long can finally be scratched. This is exactly, and as I told people, this wasn't going to happen in a day. I told people, look, have patience. If you don't have patience, get out of this talk for 5 years and tune back in 5 years. This is a process. This is not an event. Okay, so it's happening. It's working. We now have this historic law where a unclassified product has to be provided, and it's happening. It takes a little time. People have to understand you're trying to eat the elephant all in one bite. You can't. You're going to choke. You physically can't do it. You have to eat it in bite-sized pieces. And I know it's frustrating, and everybody wants. Well, I want it now. I understand, but this isn't necessarily Burger King and have it your way and have it right now. This is a much more profound topic that requires a lot of brain power from a lot of smart people a hell of a lot smarter than me.
Yeah, well, I remember when you said the 5-year timetable, you said it was in reaction to somebody talking about bodies, or you said, listen, if you want to talk about bodies, come back 5 years from now. And I'm like, if we're talking about bodies and crash retrievals in 5 years, I'm going to be pretty happy because I'm
Right.
very patient. I'm very patient. I want to see videos, but there's so much stuff still I need to learn that I don't worry about that because I'm so behind trying to keep up with your interviews and just learning more stuff. I mean, I just got into the poltergeist side. Like, I didn't even know there was a connection until Eric Davis talked about it 2 years ago. He said there's a connection between UFOs and poltergeist. So there's so much more to learn. But like, yeah, 5 years, I'm fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're getting there now, right? You now have biological effects listed as part of the law. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a huge step forward.
I never expected that. I mean, I didn't expect Senator Gillibrand came out of nowhere. I had no idea. I was like, who? She's talking about this now. So that was just a really great,
Did you
yeah,
see the hearing with the proposed new
it was great.
DOD Inspector General, the IG, where she says
Yeah.
you need to figure that out and report back to me? You know, my response to that is, congratulations, Senator. Thank you for doing that. That's precisely, we need to hold people accountable. I've often said if I was ever a senator, it's going to be bad. I'm going to be hauling people up constantly, and I know exactly where the bodies are buried. So I'm going to make a lot of people really, really uncomfortable with this topic, and not just this one, other topics involving over secrecy and over classification, because the American people do have a right to know.
Speaking of bodies are buried, you mentioned on Coast to Coast a couple of years, or maybe last year, if you were in charge, you would know exactly where to go to get the real good stuff. So is there, what am I, back in 2000, I was wondering, we were talking about this stuff 22 years ago. And I'm like, how do we get access? If there is a program with crash saucers and bodies, allegedly, hypothetically, how we would get access to that? I mean, do you have enough? I know you can't talk about certain things, but your clearances would give you access to certain locations where you would be able to bring that information out.
It's not a matter of clearance. It's a matter of knowledge. It has nothing to do with security clearance. It has everything to do with knowing the information. So, but fortunately, I don't have to do that.
Right.
Fortunately, there are other individuals that are engaged on this and working that quite earnestly.
I want to ask you about, not specifically, just hypothetically, the Wilson documents. Hypothetically, if there was a person in charge, he was vice deputy of intelligence. If there was a vice deputy of intelligence who came across a program that he was not read into that was UFO related, would he be within his rights to demand access to that program? Because there are people like, if you're not on the bigot list, you should not expect to be, read into that program. In the
Look,
hypothetical, the person's like, well, I
you can
should be.
demand all you want. You can demand all you want. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. There are lots of people that I declined reading on to our programs, whether it's AATIP or other ones that I ran, even though they said they have a need to know. Well, I made that decision. Actually, no, you don't, because I have a better understanding of the program and what your roles and responsibilities are in your portfolio aren't necessarily synergistic with ours. And so, you can submit what we call a PAR, all PAR, all day long, but I'm not gonna prove it, and you're not gonna get read on, and you're not gonna get the information. I know to some people that sounds egregious, but that's how you have to protect national security information sometimes.
I have a question from a friend. And I know you've answered this before. Is there anything else the public can do versus government efforts? For me, I mean, I know you
Do
said
what you're doing now, Joe. You're doing it. People are having the conversation now around the water cooler and around the dinner table. They're tuning in. I don't know what your followers used to be when you first started your channel, but I'd be curious how many you have now compared to what you had when you first started. If you don't mind sharing that, I think that would be very telling. Do you have
um,
that data?
on YouTube. No, I don't do it. I need to do more YouTube. I don't like being on camera and doing this, but Twitter,
I don't blame
Twitter,
you.
yeah, Twitter was 500 for the longest time, and then you get over 1,000, and then now it's over 15,000. Part of that
Okay.
is it grows exponentially when people see a number. They're like, "Oh, that person
Yeah.
knows what I'm talking about." But
So
part of it is,
you've grown
yeah,
3,000%.
it's going
Okay.
up.
So think about that for a second. 500 to 15,000. Um, that's significant. If you want an indicator that you're making a difference and your audience is making a difference, look no further, because people are getting more and more interested. They want to hear what you have to say and what others have to say. And by the way, equally important are those people that are tuning in and those followers. People say, well, the person who's actually has a channel who's most important. That's not true. That's why people say with me, "Oh, Lou, you're leading this disclosure effort." No, I'm not. I'm just playing my role in it. You, the audience, is the one leading this effort. You're the ones doing it, because it's your involvement and your interest in this that is forcing our government to come to heel on this for the first time in the history of our species. And that's a testament to your audience, not to me. And you get some of that credit, but mostly that goes to your audience. And if you want to know if we're making a difference, look at the math.
Definitely making a difference. It's amazing. I can't believe how far we've gotten so quickly. In all of your briefings you've given on the subject, what's the most interesting, encouraging, and or surprising thing you've heard from folks you were briefing?
Um, can you be a little more specific? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Just what are the most interesting reactions you've had from people who were on the receiving side of your briefings when you went to
Okay,
when you
good,
went to
great, great.
Capitol Hill? Something that
I think
surprised you, or something.
I think the most surprising is when people can't process it. It's not that they disagree with it or agree with it. After an hour briefing, it's just a blank stare, and they start asking you about football stats, as if the brain literally could not process the last hour of information. And so what it does, it switches tracks to something that it can process. Um, to me, this is perhaps one of the greatest existential moments of our species since we first learned to walk on two legs. And for senior people, especially who are paid to receive information and then make recommendations, to not be able to process it, um, not necessarily surprised, but it's interesting. It's interesting because you can almost see the synaptic loop in their eyes when you're finished with the briefing, and you're never quite sure how the person's going to take the information till afterwards. So there's this uneasy 5-second time period where it's just kind of this, and you're waiting to see what they say. And yeah, I think that for me is the most interesting when they just can't process it.
Are you able to expand at all anymore upon the on the gentleman you met who said he did your job in the 80s?
I cannot, and nor will I. Individual has not given me permission to come out, and I certainly wouldn't want to betray that confidence. I suspect at some point, hopefully that will become public, but that's not up to me. What's more important is then the individual's identity is what the individual said, and said in the presence of other individuals. That's what's interesting. And those individuals didn't seem to blink an eye.
And for people
As
who
it,
don't know, just real brief, what happened?
yeah, I was in Washington D.C. briefing some people on the Hill, and there was an individual there that was attending this meeting, and I didn't invite the individual, but clearly the individual was a known quantity, if you will, known person to the people there, and gave about an hour briefing of what we were involved with in AATIP. And afterwards, the individual came up and said, "Hey, Lou, my name is so and so. I just wanted to say, thanks for the briefing. I want to let you know that I had your program in the '80s." And I played a little coy, to be honest with you. I said, "Oh, really? You had this portfolio XYZ?" And he said, "No, no. The portfolio you just briefed, UAP portfolio. It's just we didn't get quite as far as you guys did." And I was shocked, because this is the first time somebody was acknowledging to me that the U.S. government, a particular organization within a particular service, was looking at UAPs in the '80s after Blue Book had closed down and before we were looking at it. I thought we were kind of the only show in town, and I wish we had known that before, because part of understanding this enigma is understanding the continuity within the U.S. government of the different organizations and efforts that were looking at UFOs throughout history of the U.S. Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to spend 2 years going down a rabbit hole only to find out that predecessors did the same thing, and either they came up empty-handed or that it was fruitful. You don't want to. It's nice to have a roadmap in front of you rather than just blindly walking into an area and then you find out, oh yeah, we've been down that road for decades. Well, been nice to know. So yeah, that actually occurred. That was real.
Ever heard of the term Pounce team? My friend Michael wanted me to ask you that. Pounce
No.
team? Yeah,
Nope.
supposedly it's related to crash retrievals. On Spaced Out Radio, Dave asked you if you had ever seen a gray, and you're like, you saw some pretty extraordinary things, but in every situation you needed more data. So if just hypothetically, if you were giving access to bodies and craft, how would you determine where they're from, what they are? I mean, you've touched on this before. It's like, just because if we hypothetically have that stuff, it doesn't mean we know what they are. Doesn't mean we know where they're from. How would you even go about doing that?
Well, I would first of all hire a team of medical doctors that are used to performing autopsy, so a coroner, a very highly trained coroner, and then compare and contrast the biological mechanism of whatever is in front of you and compare and contrast that to what we know of the human being, right? So, as a species, there are lots of different animals on this planet. Some have something called radial symmetry. Think of a starfish. And then you have things like us that have bilateral symmetry, okay? But we still, arm over here, leg on this side, leg on this side, eye on this side, eye on this side, 2 ears. We have that bilateral symmetry. And you want somebody who's qualified in understanding how the human being mechanism works, to include even biomechanically, understand the chemical processes, understands how the organs work and the relationship the liver might have to the kidney, to the heart, to the lungs, to the brain, how the circulatory system and pulmonary systems work. All that's important, because then you need to use that as your only base, because really that's all we have to understand, biological systems, if you will, and then apply that to what it is you're looking at. And does this organism display bilateral symmetry? Okay, if so, what are the similarities and what are the differences? Does it have 5 fingers or does it have 3 fingers? Right, and that's where you would start, and then that's just the beginning. Then you would start bringing in. From my perspective, everybody from microbiologists, virologists, probably biochemists, because I want to see the biochemistry of the organism. Does it have a metabolism? Does it metabolize ADP, adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate for energy release, and all the things that we do to get energy and use that energy? Is it similar or is it different? Right? Is it even a carbon-based life form, or is it silicone based, which is very similar to carbon but different? All those are the things that you want to look at. If it has organs like eyes, do they work like ours do, or do they see perhaps are they designed to see in a different spectrum where its visible light is either shifted down or up? Does it have hearing? Does it have the 5 fundamental senses that we have? Or does it have an additional set of senses that, like dolphins, for example, can echolocate, and sharks have certain organs on the end of their nose there, so to speak, to detect blood in the water, right? Things that we kind of look at as kind of being magical, or the way bats operate, right? Using echolocation. To them, that's a sixth sense. To us, it's kind of bizarre to think about, but it's not. It's actually pretty natural, and that's where I would start.
Thanks for that. You mentioned Roswell. I'm not
I
going to
know,
push you on.
long-winded, but it's
No,
it's not a quick
fine.
question to answer. It's not just,
No, I
well,
understand.
cut it open and see what I see. For the love of
Right.
God, no, that's not what you do.
I understand. Thanks for that. You mentioned Roswell, and you basically recently you said there's more to it than most people realize, but you also said there are other similar incidents. And you said you believe Roswell was real. Are you as confident in other incidents as you are
Yeah.
with Roswell? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
How did you react? I don't know if you remember when you were on Tucker Carlson and you said the first time you said he was asking you if there's debris from a UFO and you said yes. And that day, Eric Davis came out and said 100%, and he said landed
Yeah.
craft too. Did you see that when that came out?
I'm aware of that.
Okay. Somebody asked me, and I have to. People want me to ask you about DNA because when I first got into this, I read Zachariah Sitchin, and then I realized, and I'm like, oh my god, they created us. And then later on, I realized a lot of Sitchin, what he translated, may not have been accurate. I'm still open minded about there may have been some manipulation in the past. Is there any evidence along those lines, or when you talk about that, are you just speculating?
Well, look, I mean, DNA is the building block for most, not all, life on this planet. There are exceptions like viruses that are solely RNA, uh, ribonucleic acid. Um, there are building blocks to life that we identify as being life forms. Okay, so not necessarily universal, but for what we know, life here on this planet, and that is based on the properties of DNA, and one of the building blocks of that are amino acids. And amino acids, if you understand a little bit about biochemistry and the way it works, at the end of the day, carbon is when you say organic chemistry or organic life, what you're really saying is carbon-based units. Those things on a planet that are composed of carbon. Now, there's a lot of things that are composed of carbon, but most life forms here, if not all, are carbon-based. And so that's the starting point when you talk about life on this planet. Well, we now know there are other, even in this solar system alone, a lot of these building blocks for life exist. In fact, they're very pervasive. We sent some probes over around Jupiter and Saturn to some of these moons that have a lot of methane. Methane is a carbon based gas. It's critical for life, believe it or not, because of carbon. So I think DNA is certainly something we should look at, or certainly that arrangement. Are you familiar with AGTC and what actually what DNA is? A lot of people talk about DNA, but
Very
DNA
basic.
is okay. So I'll forgive me here. I'm not going to go too far down the trail then. But DNA is a way. It's a code. It's a code of life, and you can, if you understand how DNA works, you can. It's a blueprint. Is what it is. Like you go to Lowe's and you want to go build a shed or you want to build a house. Ultimately, you need blueprints and you need material. You need wood or steel. You need nails. You need a few things basic. And whether you want to build a shed or you want to build a garage or you want to build a mansion, right? It's all the same material, just a little bit different design and a little bit more of it. Well, that's kind of how life is on this planet. So whether you're talking about a single cell organism or you're talking about a human being or an elephant or a whale, as different as we may appear, we're all fundamentally basically the same. We're made of the same stuff, just a little bit different blueprint, but the same material. And so the question is that true universally, or is that just here on this planet? And those are some of the questions we're trying to ask right now. And that's why I think it's important when we talk about ex xeno, what we call xeno life, if you will, life that's not from here potentially. Is it constructed the same way we are? Does it require a blueprint, or are we dealing with something fundamentally different? And in DNA, you can unlock a lot of secrets. We can look at, there are aspects of our DNA that we share with a lizard and that monkeys share with a lizard. So you can go back on that tree, you can unwind the tape of DNA in essence, and see where species began and subspecies began to branch off from the tree. And you'd be surprised how much we have in common with something as simple as a lizard. A tremendous amount. In fact, even our brain, you hear about the reptilian brain. That's no joke. We share a lot of the same things, whether it's the optical lobes of the brain or the cortex and the medulla oblongata and other whatnot. So again, I know I'm probably going down the rabbit hole a little bit too much here, and I don't want to get too technical. But if you understand DNA, you understand life. And if you understand life, then you can compare and contrast that life with other forms of life.
Do you think maybe we're dealing with obviously I'm assuming this is speculation, maybe we're dealing with some of our relatives with some of these beings, assuming they're beings.
It's a possibility. We can't rule it
Yeah.
out. Again, all options are on the table until they're not on the table. We look, if you come across a species that has bilateral symmetry, 2 arms, 2 legs, kind of looks like us, you know, um, we have like 99% in common DNA with the chimpanzee and the great apes, So, and we don't really look necessarily the same, but we share a lot of the same fundamental, aspects, nose, eyes, ears, hair, whatnot. The question is that universal across the cosmos, or is that just here on this planet, right? If you come across a species that, and here's what I mean by that, if a species comes down from, let's say, outside the solar system, but it has bilateral symmetry, you have to ask one of two things. A, is it related to us? And did it come at some point branch off from the same tree? Or B, is this very common in the universe because the principles of Darwin and whatnot and adaptability don't just apply here on this planet, they apply elsewhere. And so any type of intelligent life form that can, for example, one of the most fundamental evolutionary things that our species was gifted was the opposable thumb. The ability to have an opposable thumb that allow us now to manipulate things like a pen and glasses and cell phones, create tools. That was a huge advancement for our species. Most species on this planet don't have opposable thumbs. Well, primates do, but most animals don't. That was a huge advantage for us. Well, if you come across, let's say, in this case, an alien, for example, that has opposable thumbs, well, was that because it's related to us, or is that because that there's a disadvantage for any species in the cosmos that if it develops these, then at some point this will probably develop, and then technologically it will evolve, and eventually will be, it'll be where they are. I don't know. These are precisely some of the questions we have to ask ourselves from a both a medical and a biological perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next 5 to 10 years when we encounter some of those questions and try to answer them. I know we're getting close to our time. You aware of the Bob Fish WikiLeaks emails? He wrote to John Podesta and he said he spoke with somebody in a top secret SEI cafeteria. Whoever was in there had a top secret SEI clearance, and he said that this one gentleman who was a pilot, he had worked for Blue Book, and he said that they would track UFOs coming out of the water on the east coast of Florida, and they knew exactly where they would go in and out, and they knew exactly what the frequency was. So as soon as they saw that frequency, they knew that's what it was. Are you aware of that at all? And he's like, there's going to be film of that stuff out there. We know exactly where they go in and out.
I can't talk about that.
Okay. We have 5 minutes left, Lou. I appreciate you taking as much time as you did, as much time as you have.
Joe, this is really helpful, and I really appreciate your audience and all these thoughtful questions. They're great questions. For anybody out there who thinks that you're giving me softball questions, obviously I get accused of that a lot. Oh, people only ask me easy questions. These aren't easy questions. Get your ass up here and walk that line, and between your non-disclosure agreement and going to jail, and you'll see it's really not that easy. So I want to thank you, Joe, and your audience so far for great questions.
Yeah, and I don't really. Somebody's like, make sure you ask Lou the tough questions. I'm like, I don't really have. I mean, my toughest question was the unidentified thing, and people ask about your. That's one tough question. They're like, AATIP, did they have a budget or not? But will that be? And without expanding, I have one more question. Will that be in the book about the budget, or is that something you'll never be able to talk about?
Yeah.
Like how much, where it came from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. Absolutely.
We'll wait for the book. So Condorman says, you've talked about different shapes, spheres, saucers, cigars, tic tacs, triangles, and how some of them might come together to form a craft. He says, do you think it's they're the same tech with different purposes or missions, or could they belong to different civilizations?
I think the science is the same. The car might look different, but the basic fundamental principles of propulsion are the same. That would be and again, I'm going on a limb here by giving you my opinion, but it is an informed opinion. I think it's the fundamental principles are the same because the observables are the same. The performance characteristics are the same. They seem to fall within the same parameters or envelope, performance envelope, if you will. And so that's why we make that deduction. It's just the way we look at things from an intelligence perspective. It's not just, hey, Lou feels this way. That's not at all. It's looking at things from an analytic perspective, and logically, and comparing and contrasting.
You said that we have photos of what appear to be occupants. Would that be something briefed to Congress or no?
I didn't say we have I did not of
Yeah, clarify.
individuals. What I said was, yeah. So we have people say, can you see something inside? And what I said was that there seems to be some photographic where you can that's true. I didn't say occupants necessarily. It was see inside was what I was
Okay.
referring to. I want to be very careful because I think some people say, oh yeah, there's some photograph where Lou's using to. That's not the case at all. That's not at all what I was referring to.
Would that kind of evidence be briefed to Congress?
Um, I'll let them answer that.
Okay. Anything else, Lou, that I have not covered? The book you talked about, is the book so will the book cover, how the program ran, how things came about, and the phenomena? Is it going to be both ends, not just ATIP?
It's going to be my intent is for it to allay most of the questions, if not all the questions that people have. The who, what, when, where, how, why. Who was involved? Why were we involved? What did we see? Right, that kind of stuff. Of course, I still have to go through a declassification review process for the book. That's law. I have to do that because I hold a security clearance, and the information is about a U.S. government program that I was part of.
You know the system well enough. Are you expecting it to be chopped, edited by, because it has to go through DOPSR? Is that how it has to go through?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
not up to me. That's
Yeah.
up to DOPSR.
And then you can sell the DVD edition of what was kept out on DOPSR, right?
No, I
Okay.
cannot.
How
But
much far along are you in the book? How much further do you have to finish it?
I'm pretty well down the road on it. I don't
Nice.
want to go again. I rather I'm the
Under
kind of guy that I'd rather under promise and over deliver. How about that?
Yeah, sounds great. And we're good. And I appreciate all the time. 90 minutes. It was
Joe,
great.
thank
I
you.
was
Thank you
nervous,
very
but it
much.
went well.
Yeah, why are you nervous? I mean, everybody who knows me knows that I am not the guy to be nervous with. I'm literally like your neighbor. Grab a beer, let's talk. For the record, and hopefully you can substantiate this. I never want anybody to give me their questions up front. I don't want to know. It's not a condition of being interviewed. I will be interviewed by anybody who is fair and objective. I don't give a shit if you agree with me or not. I'll still talk to you. And I've done it. I've kind of listed some, just as an example, some of those people that I already have who aren't necessarily friendly to me, but I've engaged in conversation. Now, some of them are much less friendly, and some are a little bit more objective. But I'm happy to talk to anybody. What I don't want to do is get into drama for your mama, where people will start bringing up false accusations that are completely unfounded, just for the sake of drama. I'm not interested in that. If that's what somebody wants to do, then please don't waste my time, and don't waste your time. But if you want to have an honest conversation, I've always tried to make myself available as much as possible. And, hopefully your audience can see that.
Yeah, you're one of the most available people in this field. So, and people complain about it. Too bad. I like the beard. I haven't shaved in 3 weeks, so this is the kind of beard I can grow.
I'm the opposite. I can I can shave in the morning, and if I go lift weights out in the garage out here, I'll have like a full beard by 12. It's I think it's a Latin thing. I don't know. Although you're Sicilian, right? So parli
I
italiano.
am.
You speak
I don't
Italian.
know what happened.
Do you speak
No,
Italian? Parli italiano.
no, and my grandmother used to speak a little Sicilian, and I took Italian in college, but I can't speak it.
Okay.
And
Well,
and
that's okay.
one of these days, you're like a 12-hour drive from me. I think I'll have to come visit you.
Anytime
Never
you
been to
want, you're
Wyoming.
welcome.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
incredible. It's a state that we tell people doesn't really exist, so people don't come here because it's really one of the last vestiges of the Great West of America. The spirit here is incredible, fiercely independent people here. The name of the game here is hard work. Everybody here is equal. If you work hard, you get respect. There is no self entitlement here. No one cares what you do for a living. You're more judged on how what type of truck you drive than you drive a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge. It's great people out here. Actually, we have more cows, almost twice as many cows as we have people in the state.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, if you want to get away from the craziness of the big urban areas. My wife and I and my children have lived all over the world, in different places, and been in big major urban areas before, and so we prefer kind of privacy and kind of being out of ways.
Sounds great. And yeah, one day I would love to get up there, and thank you again. And see you
Anytime.
next time. Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing.
You got
Love
it,
it.
Joe.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. And again, big thank you to your incredible audience. Thank you for what they're doing, because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're the reasons why we're having this conversation. So humbly, thank you for you all for what you're doing, and please keep it up.
All right. Well, take care. Take care.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you. I'm just seeing the super chat donations. Thanks, guys. If you guys want to ask questions, I don't think I missed. I'm sure I missed something, but Lou is great. There are some questions. There's lots of questions I had, but I'm like, nah, that's not good. That's not good. If you guys have any questions, I can answer whatever. I'm not Lou, but haha. Thanks, guys. I don't think there's any big questions I left out. I'll have to go over my questions and look. Moderators for what? I wasn't paying attention at all to the chat. Sorry. It's like I'm trying to go through my questions and also listen to him. And also keep an eye on the time, because if I follow, oh, that's one question I didn't ask about Holloman. Damn it. Holloman. I wanted to get a no comment on Holloman because I have a source who told me Holloman did happen. So there was a landing of a craft at Holloman Air Force Base. What happened detail wise, I don't know, but that's what I was heard. Yeah, I don't know if you told my goof on. That's not gonna happen. Somebody else can transcribe the interview as a birthday present for me in April. I think the best interesting question he answered is talking about, well, some people don't care about the hitchhiker effect, but he's going to write about that, his own experiences in his book, which I didn't know he was going to get that detailed. Yeah, I'll definitely have him back, Ida. He even mentioned your name. Somebody said my favorite Rush song, Hemispheres. His favorite Rush song. I wanted to ask him his favorite music. I know he likes AC/DC. I know. You gotta go. Oh. He was so quiet. You're a good boy. Treat you like a human. Right? Let's see. I will stay. He's got to go to the bathroom soon, but I'm sorry. It's hard to keep up with the comments. The puppy is 10. Thanks, Gabby. I thought it went well. Lou was great. There weren't too many questions he just did not want to answer, except for the one about the East Coast off of Florida and Bob Fish, where they were tracking UFOs going in and out of the water. I mean, if they have film of that, I mean, it's clear as day. We know where they are. I guess we'll leave them alone. We don't bother them unless we shoot them down as they go in and out of the water. But that's a big detail. Yeah, Lou is always great. He's got horrendous breath. It's unbelievable. Right? Say hi, Cook. Hi. Say hi. You don't like your haircut? Lou has a nice microphone. I need a better setup. I mean, I can't have this setup all the time. So I have to clean and move stuff out of the way. But This place is expensive enough, Vegas. Vegas is very expensive right now. Somebody wants me to ask, if you guys have any questions for me, go ahead. I mean, I'm not Lou, but all did I have to wait to interview Lou? It wasn't long. It was me not asking the question. I was keeping my distance for a while. And then I reached out to his wife. I reached out to him on Twitter, and then he told me to email his wife. And it was a couple of weeks ago, I think. Gave me a couple of dates. My next interview is going to be with Paul Eno. I want to interview him. Yeah, Ross is the reason I really focused on Bob Fish, and then I wrote to Bob Fish and wrote a whole blog about our exchanges back and forth. What was I saying about? Oh, my Paul Eno. I want to interview him. Hopefully, not too long. He's the one that investigates poltergeist case and thinks we're dealing with parasites, where he actually felt a bone structure on these, whatever they are. It was in a poltergeist case, and he also had exorcist possession cases where the people who were allegedly possessed had abduction type experiences, but the priest didn't want to go there. He thought it was nonsense. So there may be a connection. Oh, and did Eric Davis brief the Canadians? I know others. As far as I know, no. All I know is about the Senate and Select Intelligence Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, and various DoD agencies. Eric is so hard to get a hold of. I mean, not to get a hold of, but he's just so busy. I don't really get to talk to him very much on Facebook Messenger. I want to hear more about Holloman too. I don't think Lou would have been able to expand about that, but I think my favorite response was me asking if he's as confident about other similar incidents as Roswell as he is about Roswell, because he said he believes Roswell. And he said yes. If Lou was given immunity from his NDA in a congressional hearing, could he testify in congressional tribunals and bodies? I'm sure he could. I mean, whatever his knowledge is, I'm not sure if he has firsthand knowledge or if he's been shown pictures or if he's been to the actual site where they supposedly have a craft, which Stephen Greer said, and then Danny Sheehan had to deflect all of that. Increasing Lou topics for Lou. Well, if Lou is going to talk about his experiences that are similar to Skinwalker and it's going to be in the book, then I think the woo is going to be wide open. I mean, what is that? I still don't know. The connection between poltergeist and UFOs, but there is a connection. It's obvious. I mean, which I didn't even know until 2 years ago when Eric Davis mentioned it on Coast to Coast. How did I miss that? It's like, now I'm starting to, when I go on YouTube, the first thing I try to find something new on that. And it's always new for me. It's like, did I ask David's question? Yes, I did ask David's question. Yeah, David, if you have unlimited time, I would follow up on his answers. I hate him answering and then me jumping to the next question. But if I follow up and he goes on for too long, then I'm going to miss on another question. So you got to kind of balance it out. And I interrupted him one time. Hopefully I didn't cut off information. I always get on people's case when they interrupt Lou or somebody, and I might have done that. I think I did it once though. Thanks, David. Would I interview a real life exorcist? Yeah. The guy Paul Eno worked with the real life exorcist. The people, Lorraine and who's that guy? Ed Warren, they believe it's demons, and Paul Eno does not think it's demons. I didn't interrupt Lou except once. And I didn't want to get into the. As soon as he said we could talk about 2019, but there's so much more recent important incidents. So it's like, yeah, it seems like it's going to be overwhelming in the next couple of years. And like he said, if we're talking about bodies 5 years from now, I'm going to be really happy. And I know it's 5 years, but maybe it'll happen faster. The fact that we even have that question, even bring it up. I don't know if my parasitology question worked that well, but. I don't think Lou being in virology, I don't know if that had anything to do with him being in AATIP. I know they in the remote viewing program, they would choose counter intel folks, and AATIP also, he chose him as a counter intel folk person. So I'm not sure what the reason is for that. One of my questions that was low on the list. He's on the academic. I'm sure Lou is working as a consultant. I'm sure the government. Thanks, Coin. Petting a dog on my lap doesn't look good for the people just joining. Too bad, right, Cook? Too bad. At least I'm not jumping through a portal with my cat. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Linda Moulton Howe talk about her cat. Yeah, James did a great job. I have to listen again. I think I listened. There's so many interviews with Lou. It's like if I hit the lottery, I would hire somebody to go and transcribe every one of his interviews. I can't do it myself. I mean, there are people I've offered to help, and I will reach out to them. But Lou didn't wear a cap. I requested no cap, Lou. Thanks, Edward. I appreciate that, Edward Roman. I'm trying to think, and I had pictures, but I wonder if it would have worked. See, I had my photos. Oh, that's what I didn't ask. Damn it! This is I had his question, but this is the one I didn't get to ask. I wanted to get a denial about this. Oh, that was the Home Depot. I don't know who made that. It might have been Paul Reddington because Lou says he goes to Home Depot all the time. So they'll make a statue outside of Lou. And then somebody made the statue. I wanted to show him that. Eric Davis's emails where they talked about briefing Senate committees. That's when John Greenwald said, I don't believe Eric Davis briefed anybody. I'm glad Lou addressed that. That was the yeah, it's funny how Lou reacted to that. Eric Davis talked about landed technology. I wonder if Eric got any flack for that because he went further than Lou did. Did I get to the deck? Didn't I haven't coined that, and I'm behind. I will though. It's on my list this week. Now that this is over, I can relax a little bit. Lou is Cookie. He didn't turn into Cookie. Lou transported here through a portal. That's another thing I was going to, I think that's some of how Lou gets his information about Roswell. Get rid of stupid me. There we go. So there's independent interviews, same way Friedman did. And I think Eric Davis probably too. Eric Davis has a strong opinion on Roswell. I wanted to show you. That's how I first heard about the poltergeist phenomena. I think Danny Silva tweeted that too. That was Eric Davis's theory to Stephen Greenstreet, talking about the fact is if they're, and I forget that if they're traveling through dimensions, then they've got a home somewhere. Doesn't mean it's here though. Could be somewhere else, but it could be on Earth, and they could be hiding here in a shadow biome. That's another thing. I know Lou said he understands the secrecy. Eric was like, in 2000, Eric Davis said, why the excruciating level of secrecy on this stuff? What benefit does it serve? The taxpayer, the Congress, the president, national security, science and human knowledge to keep this so secret for so long. And that was in the alien autopsy email. And whether or not, the alien autopsy, everybody believes it's fake, but Kit Green was also briefed on, before that video came out, and what he saw was similar to the alien autopsy. Of course, they could have been feeding him bogus briefings, which he talked about. I think he calls it active measures. So that's what I wanted to ask Lou about, and I didn't. Not that big of a deal. A source of mine who said various people within the government in positions of oversight. I think most of you who have seen this, it basically explains how the crash retrieval program was hidden using a trick with a what's it called? A shell company. And when you go to look for the program, you're not going to find it. They said it hides the audit trail. And so I wanted to ask him, I mean, he obviously can't answer that. I just wanted to say, have you seen efforts when other programs were hidden using this trick of a shell company? But anyway, that's another thing I was gonna be on with when he was on with Christina Gomez a couple of days ago. He's like, people are talking about portals and there's no evidence, there's no science, but there is. According to Eric Davis, wrote a whole paper on wormholes, and let me see if that's the last one. So yeah, let me pull up the one I was going to pull up. I can pull it up right now. Let me see. Share screen, and it was Twitter. Darn it, I can't find it. Of course not. Chrome tab. Nope. I can read it, but it was Eric Davis was talking about how, Lou said there's no data for portals, but Eric Davis said at the Nids Ranch, we had the experience where, we saw a wormhole. This is where that creature crawled through. And they saw it was like a Bigfoot creature. And they also saw an opening in the sky. This is Eric Davis' quote, in broad daylight with a triangular craft that came through it. He goes, that's an example of data that indicates there's a wormhole involved. He goes, well, that's an example. He goes, I mean, geometry tells you what a wormhole looks like when it intersects our space. It appears as a very bright, intensely bright. Thank you, John. Intensely bright point of light. And then as the intersection gets larger and larger, it opens up and you begin to see the hole. So basically, Eric Davis is talking about a wormhole, which he wrote a paper about. And then Brandon Fugel jumped in and said, I agree. We've observed that phenomena on the ranch with supporting the theory of wormholes and portals. And I was going to get on Lou's case about that, saying there is science behind it, but whatever. I'll stay on for 10 more minutes. Give me a break. My God. Get a life. Joe, what was your favorite part of the interview? What answer were you blown? Oh, the favorite part is him saying that he's just as you're in timeout, V. I'm sorry. Give me a break. My favorite answer from Lou was when he said I did not bring up mutilations. No, I didn't. I purposely did not. I mean, but my favorite answer is when he said that his opinion is just as strong about the other similar incidences as Roswell. So, which I didn't expect him to give that answer. I was hoping for it, but I thought he'd say, I can't talk about it. But he said, yeah, and we have Eric Davis, and you saw his face. Eric Davis mentions landed craft. I have a source that mentioned a landed craft in Kingman, which has been written about by other people. If we have landed craft, that means we have intact craft. Yeah, Lewis mentioned that Eric Davis cannot lie, which of course Eric Davis can lie. But for the most part, Eric is so brutally honest. People with clearances can't lie. Messes up their review. Well, Eric Davis said, if you ask somebody about a certain special access program and you don't have the right clearances, you're going to be lied to because that's the rule. So, of course, that's different than lying like on a TV show or a podcast. See, this is way above my head. When I do communicate with Eric, I've only talked to him once, but he would not talk like that because I wouldn't understand what the hell he's talking about. Like someone who has expired. Yeah, I mean, his answer about how he would, dissect bodies was, I wasn't expecting that. Just trying to figure out where they come from. How do we figure out where they come from? Even with DNA, that might not tell us, even if the DNA is different. Yeah, I mean, that's just how he is. If Eric has a problem with me, he will tell me. I remember one time I pissed him off and he said it. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't hold back. He just speaks his mind. If there's certain things he can't talk about, he'll say so, or he'll just remain silent. And this is through Messenger on Facebook. Yes, I didn't really want, that was new information about who that was, and I'll have to look about what he was saying was connected to DNI. Hopefully that comes out, because otherwise it doesn't really mean much to us. It's great that there's progress, and Lou mentioned it and acknowledged it, but we don't really know what that's about. Thanks, Arno. Did he hint about it in other interviews? Yeah, it's possible he didn't. I mentioned he did. Um, I want to hear about the Hitchhiker stuff if that happened to him. And the dog is digging a hole somewhere. I'm gonna have to get him in a second. Listen to UFO Addicts. He says we're not alone on this planet. Well, I mean, if we know that they're coming in and out of the water at a specific location, then somebody knows a hell of a lot more than what they can say. Just imagine, just as the years go on, as long as we're patient, you're going to get rewarded. Well, we're all going to get rewarded with information that's going to be mind blowing. To us, we're going to be like jumping up and down. Other people are going to be like, "What the hell?" That's why I didn't want to waste my time with him on this, but one of the things I think will come from the masses realizing that UFOs are real and something is here is they're going to say, I was lied to all these years. I mean, there were people that were talking about this for years and I ignored it, and other people lied about it. And so I think they'll say, what else were we lied to about? And that's when people like me come in and say, remote viewing is legit. Don't believe when the government said it didn't work. And they studied it for 20 years and it worked. It didn't work all the time, but when it worked, it was amazing. You know, I wanted to talk. I mentioned remote viewing. I don't think Lou doesn't really, it doesn't seem like he's comfortable talking about it. Supposedly he was trained in it and he has the remote viewing history somehow. That is the story, Danny. I drink water, but it's vodka. So I don't think I've ever drank. I don't think I've drank vodka. Anunnaki. You know, I read Sitchin and the whole Anunnaki stuff. The problem is a lot of the Anunnaki, a lot of the numbers in Sitchin's books are related to precession. I wonder if that's a story being told just to get those precessional numbers in there, because precession might have to deal with cyclical stuff that happens on this planet. Yeah, I don't think I would. I don't know if I would read too much into the lizards as reptilians. If you're like, but I mean, I was telling somebody the other day. People hate when I mention this person's name, but the first time I heard of reptilians was 96 or 97 at a David Icke lecture in Florida. There was like 20 people there. And somebody in the audience got up and said, I'm starting to have these personal experiences with these reptilian creatures. And I had never heard it before. So that was the first time. But there were reports of reptilians before that, which I stumbled upon recently. I'm trying to keep up. Outside of the government, trying to keep this under wraps. I don't know if they're outside of the government or just very well hidden. I don't know what people said against Lou. I haven't been paying attention. Why? But why are you being negative? I thought the interview was good. Why do you have to say anything about Davis? Have you ever spoken with Davis? Have you ever communicated with him? Tell me, share your experiences with him that you've communicated. Come on, give me a break. I have them not watching the show Resident Alien. By the way, it's the first time out I've given. David Icke, people hate him. Some people think he's an anti-Semite. I have his books. My ex-wife has a lot of his books. People can say what they want. There's some information that I like in there. And there's also lectures I've seen from him that were interesting. 9 hours. 9 hours. Lou was part of the remote viewing program. Yeah, I've heard about that. I would love to hear more, and I would hope that's in his book. If he's going to talk about Hitchhiker type stuff, I would hope that his remote viewing stuff, I could have asked him that, but we'll see soon enough. But so I think he's had real experiences. I'm not impressed by the videos he's shown so far. It doesn't mean they're not anomalous. It's just I'm not impressed by any videos. That's another thing I should have asked Lou about. You know, are you positive the gimbal is rotating? But it's like there's so much stuff going on now. It's like I'm hoping we don't ever have to talk about gimbal again, unless there's so much more to that case that we need to know. We need more videos. I mean, we've been debating 3 videos for so long, and then the Corbell videos. It's like, but I think Bledsoe's have had real experiences. I think they're saying it's angelic. How do you even know if something's angelic? How do you know if something's not pretending to be angelic? How do you know it's not just creating? I forget the word. Simple though. I think they've had real experiences. I don't know if they're still continuing. I don't like being on camera. Thank you. I've always been behind the camera. I've been a camera operator. I like taking my time writing, especially if I make a mistake. I I don't. I'm good if I know a topic back. Like remote viewing, I could talk about easily. I don't know everything there is to know about remote viewing, but I studied it for so long and read so many books. I can talk competently about it. Some aspects of the phenomena I cannot talk about competently. So I'd rather have a blog where I can look back and Google stuff that I don't understand, big words. There are times I'm listening to not Lekatsky, Jim Semivan, and he uses big words. I'm like, I do it all the time. I got to go Google that word and I'll link to it. I'm like, if I don't understand it, there may be some other people that might not understand. Interesting about reptilian Anunnaki theories is the intersection of hard and soft science. Its material also exists in the immaterial in my subjective experience. If there are reptilians, maybe they are physical and non-physical. They can become physical. I'll check it out. Yeah, trust me, if I mention Ike, there are plenty of people who will just tune me out. I try not to mention him, but too controversial. But if there's something good, I'll say one thing. I pulled a quote recently and I didn't tell people who the quote was from, and I think it got like 125 likes. That was David Icke. So better off to quote him and not say who it's from, because people have a bias. I want to know about this upcoming Spielberg doc. I don't really know about it. I want to know about Lou's book. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Bledsoe's making money unless he sells a show, which I think there's been rumors about that. They do their show, but it's maybe interviews. More coming from No Cheese on the Moon. I think David Icke makes fun of. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to mention that name. A friend of mine always impersonates him and mentions the moon, the cheese. Certain people believe that the moon is made of cheese. I need glasses. The AI stuff has always been vaporware. How do you see the priors training data for UFO ships when we don't have verified pictures to train the AI on? Yeah. Maybe at their level they do have verified pictures. So maybe that's, on a public level, you're right. But maybe at the classified level. I would love to interview Mellon. I would really have to prepare for that to get something new on him. I got to reach out to Mellon. I should try to do one interview a week, or at least 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. Yeah, David Icke used to be a commentator and a soccer player, I think, a goalie. Lou did not give an ETA on his book, but he said he was done with it. So, yeah, Lewis talked about Galileo. It wasn't on my list. Semivan would be a really great interview. There's more Semivan coming, not for me. I'm not really sure I can expand on what he's been saying because it's really good. DeLong is another one I want to reach out to. I have a friend who knows a lot of DeLong. Michael Vai knows a lot of DeLong. I would love to have him. Oh shoot, that's another question I didn't get to ask Lou. Michael Vai had a question for me. Uh-oh, damn it. Dolan, I did a really short interview of Richard Dolan at the UFO MegaCon in Laughlin last year. Melinda Leslie, I wonder what Melinda thinks of Lou's answer of my labs. I interviewed Melinda in maybe 2000. I interviewed her. I need to interview her again. I also need to look at her Denmark entire presentation. Semivan may have consulted on Nope. When is that movie supposed to come out? Semivan's interview on aliens and artists is great. That was part 1. Part 2, hopefully soon. I need to look at. I've heard about it. Andy, check it out. I would like to interview Diana too. But it comes to a point where I hear interviews, I'm like, it's like, what else can I add to this? With Lou, I was able to add some. I mean, it's hard. He's done so many interviews. I've reached out to Gillibrand's. I need to try again. I reached out to her aide, no response, but it was on Twitter. I need to do an email. Eric Weinstein, I don't know. I was annoyed the way he handled Hal Puthoff. Yeah, you could definitely break new ground. That's why I'm going to interview Paul Eno. I just got to reach out to him, Poltergeist, and I want to push back on some of his theories because he thinks that they start out by making little knocks and scaring you, then feeding off the fear. But then that's just like a seance where there's no fear going on. Starts off very basic, and then the phenomena increases as time goes on, whatever that phenomena is. Yeah, Lou just said it. It's going on as far as last week. So it's like, I wonder how good some of these cases are. I liked his answer because I don't think he did it. He's spoken about Congress people sharing their experiences with him, except on David Marceau's case. I tweeted the heck about archons for a while. When I forget who the author is who writes about them. Mishlov, he would be a good interview. See, I know people support financially interviews more, but I don't like to do interviews like this. But I will. I'll do them. Not for money. Obviously, I would be doing interviews every day if that's all I cared about. I like Twitter and transcripts, even though transcripts take forever. And I bring up money is because I do this all day long, and I just have to make money. I just have to. I'm trying to get a real job, but no, so far nothing. I am applying for video jobs all over the country. And whoever donated money, I haven't looked yet. I saw a couple. Thank you very much. I did not look at the chat during the interview. I have somebody who's offered to transcribe. I've had other people transcribe. I've had like 4 people, but 2 of them, one of them disappeared recently. Another one disappeared. 2 disappeared after saying they would help. I don't know what happened. One I have to reach out to again. Now, when I transcribe, I put it through Otter. I take the MP3, I put it through Otter, and it's fine. It's great, but it's not even close to accurate as far as overall accuracy. It's really good, but doesn't put in the right not parentheses, the right grammar. Sometimes spelling is off. It takes a lot of work. It's almost easier for me to do it sometimes when I'm on Twitter and just live tweeting. I have a Patreon already. I don't put it up there. I hate doing it, but my Patreon is up. I have like 60 Patreons. So yeah, I have that, and I have my PayPal too, and Venmo. Some folks said I should take crypto, which I have to look into. And I also have to add Cash App, I think they said. But I gotta go soon. 10 more minutes because the dog's gotta go. When will we see HD pictures or HD footage? I would like, whatever our representatives are seeing is enough to impress them for Senator Gillibrand to not rake that guy over the coals, but she's obviously into it. I'm really curious what they're seeing. And if Lou's right and they're going to be able to tell us what they're seeing without, before we get to videos, I'd be happy. Describe what you're seeing. Tell us, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Heinrich. I want to know what you're seeing. That's not, it has nothing to do with sources and methods, as David Height brought up, and I brought up to Lou. And he's like, well, we're getting close to that, I think. Thanks, Mr. Sin. I think I'm going to go now. I'm going to eat. I'm going to let the dog pee and poop. And thanks for being here. And sorry about the timeout, V, but I wanted to see what timeout did. I never did timeout before. Talk to you guys soon. And I'll have a whole bunch of transcripts coming out this week with lots of links, and I'll do videos. I got to do more videos where I'm just talking about that stuff, summarizing it. I know people are doing it, but I need to do more of it. Thanks, guys. It was like I've never had that many people on here at once, but that's because of Lou. So, yeah, thanks everybody. I see all your thank yous. Hit like, subscribe. Thanks, Teresa. So, anyway, all right, guys. Talk to you soon.